Let's check in now with the markets. Gary Booysen from Rand Swiss is with us. Gary, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, it was really a muted day to some extent on the markets. We did end up in the positive, but I suppose everyone is excited about the stimulus in the US. Is that the reason?
I think that's a pretty good reason to see markets a little bit higher. We're in a very, very quiet patch at the moment. So we're coming out of the Chinese Golden Week holiday, and we will also have Columbus Day in the US today. So that does mean that equity markets in the US are open, but the bond markets are closed. Now, that's just taking a lot of volume out. We've also got, we're just before the start of earnings season in the US. So the big banks are going to be reporting, JP Morgan, Citigroup, etc. overseas, and that's really when I think markets are going to start moving. So a little bit of a light news day, so a little bit of a drift in our local market as well. We did get some manufacturing data out over the course of the day, but the currency markets very, very muted. Equity markets, as you said, slightly up. The financial sector doing pretty well, and a little bit of a subsidence in the oil markets as well, just as we saw Libya bringing some production back on stream. We also saw Norway, which had a supply disruption, also coming back on stream. And a little bit of optimism around how fast the US is going to come back after Hurricane Delta. So oil markets are a little bit softer, but overall a very muted day of trade, and I think we're going to see a lot more action as the week unfolds.
Gary, what did you make of Bok Properties? I mean, they took a 50% hit on profits. These are the guys that are putting up these moiklu of big megacity centre near Pretoria, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. So, they're obviously one of the biggest sectional title developers in South Africa. I think they are the biggest. And, understandable. I think the fact that the company still has profits after what we've been through in 2020 is an achievement in itself. The company also declared a dividend, which is always optimistic. So when the company feels comfortable enough to return funds to shareholders, despite, as a property developer, essentially being locked down from March until June, and their development's only really starting up again in June. I think it's a positive. It's definitely a positive set of results. I think the market was expecting a fairly good set. When I say good set of results, yes, earnings have collapsed, but I mean we've got to put them in context. And on the back of that, we didn't see too much movement on the underlying shares.
Gary, before I let you go, just a couple of seconds. I see banks were up today. You alluded to this in your first answer. But again, banks have been somewhat cheap recently, haven't they? I mean, they've been volatile as well. Just very quickly, what's your take on how the banks were doing today?
Yeah, I think it's following on from what's happening in the overseas markets again. So we've, as I said, we've got the big banks reporting, but we've also got the long end of the yield curve starting to lift. So basically, long-dated U.S. Treasuries, that yield is starting to increase. Mm-hmm. We know the Fed has got the view that they are going to suppress the short end of the curve, and essentially international banks will make money when the yield in the longer term starts to increase, and with I suppose better movements in share prices on some of the international banks. I think this is just the South African banks following through. Banks need higher interest rates to be able to make money, and if the US starts to see a world in which they might be increasing rates, South Africa probably will follow, and our banks will do a little bit better as well.
Yeah, that's the theory. Well, thanks very much indeed, Gary Booysen there from Rand Swiss. Let's just wrap up by taking a final look at those indicators.